we're returning to this topic of health, healing, and spiritually awakened living. And I have been using the inspiration, this is an ancient parable. Don't fight sickness, bring in health. Don't fight darkness, bring in light. Because that's what we need to do. Health, healing, and spiritual awakening are natural for us. They're natural for everyone. It's natural for everyone because those inclinations are innate to the soul. It aligns with life with a capital L, life's natural inherent purpose to bring forth healing or wholeness for all. That's always going on in the universe, sustaining life. So our health, our healing, our spiritual awakening is turning towards that, learning how to call it forth, learning how to cooperate with it. So far in this series, I've offered some tools for doing that. Started off with discernment. Look into the nature of reality and see how you can align with that. Prayer, which is always good. Open the heart. And breathing. Sometimes it comes down to that, right? Breathe. And all ways to foster awareness of the inner light. And so today I want to talk about this process of affirmation and how to really change our mind and, in a sense, change the trajectory of our life by telling a new story. Because our thoughts and our speech, our words, can carry the soul power of healing. And we can call that healing forth and align with it by affirming what is true, even in the midst of difficult, challenging situations. Now, I want to make it clear at the outset, and I'm going to weave it into my talk a little bit more, but this is not about denying the presence of difficulty. But I want to say that even more importantly than not denying the presence of difficulty, we should never deny the presence of truth. So we're more prone to do that. So how do we use this process of affirmation to access the power and presence of truth with a capital T? Divine truth, divine presence, divine power. So we turn to Rumi for inspiration. And this is a good one. This is from Kabir and Camille Helminski and their Rumi Daybook. So this selection is called No Prayer is Complete Without Presence. Oh God, what a good helper you are. Hear and respond to the cry of those in difficulty. Oh God, what a good helper you are. Hear and respond to the cry of those in difficulty. Oh God, there are so many traps, so many baits, and we are like hungry, greedy birds. Every moment we're caught in some new snare. Even when we might become a falcon or a bird of the heavens. O you who are without need, each moment you free us. Each moment you free us. And then again, we fall into another trap. We put grain into our barn, and then we lose it. Why don't we consider that this loss comes from the gnawing of mice? These little mice have ruined our barn. O soul, first stop the mischief of the mice, then work to gather the grain. Hear a saying of the Master of Masters. No prayer is complete without presence. Connection with divine presence requires a quiet mind, an opening to experience, communion with the divine reality that illumines the mind. We get caught up in thinking we are the mind, but we are that light of God that illumines the mind. So in order to experience presence, we can't be caught up in the mind. We have to stop the mischief of the mice. What are the mice? Those little thoughts that are scurrying around all the time, stealing the grain of our peace. So some days, we many days, I would say, maybe every day, we try to be present and remember the divine truth of our being. But the mice of worry, of fear, of self-doubt, frustration, anger, confusion, or distraction invade our mental field. They come into our soul barn, gnaw away at our serenity, and they refuse to leave. These afflictive thoughts, these little mice of afflictive thoughts, steal away all the peace that we stored up from our last meditation retreat. So Kriya Yoga teachings offer many ways to quiet the mind because, as I said, the mind reflects the light of the soul. If you don't clear the mind, you have difficulty accessing that inner light, that inner peace of God that is always there. Even though divine support is always present for us, always present. God is omnipresent. That divine support is always present. But if the mind is agitated or cloudy, we are not able to be fully present to that divine support. I'm getting ready now for a trip to Georgia to teach at Center for Spiritual Awareness, my teacher's meditation retreat center there. And I'm so looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to being there again. And, my gratitude for him and everything he taught me and everything that he gave me is immeasurable. And I'm so grateful for everything and for the teachings, of course. And oftentimes, the teachings that he gave me, the instruction, would come during ordinary situations that I had the opportunity to be with him, and what I learned would then change my mind and strengthen me, strengthen my ability to be able to live fully and gracefully. And when I first met him, I had the opportunity to travel with him. But I was terrified of flying. So I would notice, and then I would let my mind run off with things about flying. Like, you're in a metal can flying through the air at breakneck speeds, like, what about that is a good idea? That's where my thoughts would be. And I was a wreck, and my teacher traveled a lot, and he was really serene. I needed help. And so I confessed to him, about my sweaty palms and my mental panic. And I asked him, what he did to stay calm, you know, in travel specifically. And he said, I see myself there. I see myself there. Like wherever he was going, whatever he was doing, he said, I see myself there. And so his mind was not on the metal can. And his mind was not on turbulence or flight delays or who was sitting next to him on the plane. His mind was focused on his purpose, on his dharma, where he was going, and really more importantly, why he was going. It was all contained in that little snippet of, I see myself there. That's what he was about. It was his practice of, you know, seeing myself there was a natural outpicturing of an intentional life. So if we want to stop being tossed around by the winds of change, we can learn to anchor ourselves with purpose, with our dharma, with what we are doing in life that truly, truly matters. That will guide us through life's inevitable turbulence. Proverbs 29:18, without vision, the people perish. So it's good to ask ourselves and to be in tune and in touch with that. You know, what is your vision for your life? What is it for? What is it about? Not later, not after, but now. See yourself there. Not in the turbulence. See yourself there. Focus on that. What are we serving? Focus on that. When we're living with higher purpose and serving life, we can lean into divine support because we're working in harmony with life's inherent healing tendency. We're contributing to life's natural flow. So focus on living with higher purpose and see yourself there. We do that. Then, you know, we gather our peace. I mean, it feels peaceful to me just to talk about it. And those of you who are listening, I can see, oh yeah, my purpose, yeah. So we do that, but then as Rumi notes, we lose it again. Oh, you who are without need, each moment you free us. And then we fall into another trap. We put our grain into our barn and then lose it. Why don't we consider that this loss comes from the gnawing of mice? Those worry thoughts. So here's our practice today for dealing with the mice of worry thoughts or anger thoughts or whatever that gnaw away at our soul peace. And our practice is straight out of Sage Patanjali's Awakened Living playbook called the Yoga Sutras. Sutra 233. When the mind is disturbed by negative thoughts, one should cultivate and dwell on their opposites. When the mind is disturbed by negative thoughts, one should cultivate and dwell on their opposites. Here's how it works. So we notice the troubling thought or emotion disturbing the mind. Has that ever happened? Okay, yeah. So you notice that. And then you name it. Anger, hatred, frustration, worry, sadness, distraction, fear. And then consider what the opposite of that would be. See, like you have something to do when this is going on. Consider what the opposite would be. Love, friendliness, patience, faith, abiding joy, steady focus, courage. Then reflect on whatever quality is the opposite. Reflect on that quality, call it forth, imagine it, cultivate it, feel it. Now, here's where I want to clarify that this practice is not pretending that we do not feel anger or hatred or sorrow or frustration. We're not denying that, because that's part of being human, and we need all of our feelings. So we're not saying you shouldn't feel that way. We're just saying, I want to be more functional. So we don't deny those feelings, but we use them as a prompt to cultivate a peaceful mind. Because what we really need is a peaceful mind. Why? So the light of God, the soul light, can shine through the mind and we can be more functional. So, by doing this process, we don't pretend that we don't have afflictive thoughts or feelings, but we use them as a prompt to cultivate a peaceful mind. And by doing this, of course, we don't make conditions disappear. But we do change our capacity to respond to them. And that's what's important. Rather than react with this cycle of afflictive emotions or pain-producing thoughts, we observe, feel, and name the thought or the emotion. And then we look deeper. We inquire, what is the opposite of this? This spiritual practice is not simply changing one thought for another. It doesn't work at that level. You may have tried that. You shouldn't be thinking that. You shouldn't be feeling that. Okay, well, how about this? That works for about 5 minutes. Affirming at that level by just, pasting one thought on top of the other has been compared to being in hell and affirming it's not hot and I'm not here. And that doesn't change much. So what's the difference? We really want to look at this. What is the difference in this process? Aren't we just, quote unquote, affirming that I'm not angry, but deep down I really am? It's like you ever have a friend who's like seething with something and they don't want to talk about it, and they don't, maybe they're on the spiritual path, so they don't want to say they're really angry, or another word you would have for that. And so you ask them how they are, and they say, fine. Fine. So we don't want to do that. So here's what's different about this process. The deeper work that's beyond bringing in a new thought to replace the old thought. First, we use our discernment again. We notice that the negative thought or afflictive emotion or thought, and we notice it. We contemplate its effect on the body and mind. We become aware of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and also aware of what it does to the mind and to the body. We recognize the mice. And we say, I'm not going to let you steal my grain of peace. We recognize it. And we know if we don't counter that, it will multiply like mice. More and more, spiraling like that. So first we use that discernment about what's happening in our soul barn, which is the mind, where we want to accumulate peace. We notice what's happening, and we're aware that we want to make a change there. So second, and here's the esoteric part of it that I think will be really helpful to understand. We discern that a reactive thought to a condition is an effect. Okay, you have to put on your discernment hats for this part of the talk. We discern that a reactive thought or emotion to a condition is an effect. It's subject to change. It's a reaction to something that is in that realm of change, a reaction to a condition, something that's happening. Those things change all the time, right? You've noticed that. Conditions change, thoughts change, feelings change. So if you have a reactive thought and emotion, it is in response to some conditions which are always subject to change. So it's at that level. We don't want to live at that level. We want to be aware of that level, but we want to have a deeper awareness. And here's the deeper power of the practice. We use that awareness of this conditional response as a prompt to call forth and cultivate something unchanging. Are you following me? So what would that be? An unchanging divine quality within us, an inherent quality that is not the result of something else. So when we meditated together this morning, I said, notice that behind all this thought activity, there is peace. And that peace is the peace of God that is omnipresent, that is eternal. It is always there. It's not the effect of anything else. And it is always within you. So, in a sense, you're substituting something unchanging for something that is unreliable and changing. Not substituting one thought for another, but in a sense, one state of consciousness for another, if you want to look at it that way. Peace is always within us. If you don't let the mice get it. Joy is always within us. Divine possibility and potential for healing is always within us. Always. Compassion is always within us. Always. Even when afflictive emotion is gnawing away, stealing from our soul barn, we call forth those soul qualities that are within us and bring them forth to strengthen our ability to respond rather than be caught in reaction. We have that soul power. We don't just affirm a different condition. We change the story altogether because we change ourselves. We have that power to change the story by changing ourselves, by changing what's going on in the mind. So I want to conclude with a beautiful story about a friend's healing. We were walking together on a mountain trail, and she started opening up to me about the deep pain she was feeling about the breakup of her marriage of many years. She was feeling hurt. She was feeling angry, fearful. All those feelings that would be natural in that situation, that were appropriate for her to be feeling. Okay, let's pause for a moment and go back to Sutra 233. That sutra begins, when the mind is disturbed by negative thoughts. This ancient scripture about nature of mind, nature of reality, it starts out when the mind is disturbed by negative thoughts. Notice it does not say if the mind is disturbed by negative thoughts. It says when. It happens to everyone, and then it gives us the prescription. When this happens, cultivate the opposite. Isn't that beautiful? So, okay, back to the story. So all those thoughts and feelings she was having were absolutely natural to that situation she was in. So she had a version of cultivating the opposite that she shared with me that I remembered. This was years ago, and I remembered all these years because it was just brilliant. So she knew that her feelings were normal, but she also knew that rehashing the events that led up to this breakup and clinging to the feelings that she was having were exacerbating her pain and interfering with her ability to make wise decisions in a time when she really needed to be able to make wise decisions. She said, when feelings arise, I feel a pain in my chest like my heart is breaking. And I just have been saying, my heart is breaking. And then she said, now when I notice that twinge, instead of affirming heart breaking, I say to myself, heart opening. And now I can breathe again. Heart opening. She made a new story for herself, a healing story. I'll close with Rumi. This translation by Halle Lisa Ghaffori. To brood is to wander through a grove where one sheep strays and 100 wolves follow. To brood is to wander through a grove where one sheep strays and 100 wolves follow. Why did I make brooding my vocation when awe was an option? And from the Christian Bible, a final word. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Om.